screens. We've got a couple of announcements for things coming this week. I'm not sure if there was some planetary lineup this week, but it seems like everything is happening. Still some more activities this week for Career Week. We've got Focus today, and then you'll see the second announcement, quite a distinguished visitor coming to campus on Friday that hopefully can hang around. But go ahead and watch these for a couple minutes.
We had been prevented from marching, and we went to federal court. And I had spent the day in federal court. And we actually won the case. But as I came home and had been in court all day, we didn't have any cell phones in those days, so he hadn't heard from me all day long. He started picking up pillows and throwing them at me, saying, "Where have you been? I haven't heard from you all day long. You have to keep me informed." And he started throwing pillows, and I started throwing them back, and I'd never seen him quite so happy and frivolous. And 15 minutes later, he was gone.
Thank you, and welcome to Focus for 2013. Few updates on the schedule. Hopefully a number of you got to the workshops just from looking in the hallways and the way some of them were packed out. Looks like a number of you were. But following this, we have lunch in the DC, but today's a little different. Chartwell's is calling this their grand opening day for the newly remodeled DC, and there are a whole string of vendors who are handing out special samples and special lineup, and I guess the exciting part, they're going to get out the liquid nitrogen and be freezing instant ice cream and all sorts of things. So unfortunately, it's still a regular ticketed meal, so it's not a freebie for those of you not on a plan. But then at 1:30, our keynote speaker is going to present another workshop. She'll be speaking in the Ralph Carey Forum. So hopefully you'll be able to wander by there. Her title at 1:30, Food for All, An Eater's Guide to Feeding the World. So come and enjoy that. And then at 2:45 in the library, we're going to roll out the coffee and the cookies and snacks, a chance to mingle and share ideas from the day. The whole point is to come and tell somebody else what you've learned or thought about related to food today. So please swing by the library and enjoy some snacks. Also, the idea behind Focus is to bring us together to think a little bit, and I'm hoping that it doesn't end today. Food is a topic, of course, that will be part of us for the rest of our lives, but that you can continue to talk about it, not only in your classes, but think about it in the days ahead. Focus really doesn't do its job, its purpose, if we stop thinking about food after today. So hopefully the topics will continue. Quick thanks to the CPLA committee, a group of faculty who helped plan and put this together. A couple of people in particular, Robbie Bolton and Dr. Mojo, and then all the faculty who put on workshops this morning too, who have helped make this day a success. A couple of things when we talk about food, as we kind of get into the speaker here. I've got about 3 different images that I have been bouncing around in my head. Just last week, got one of those munchy moods and reached for a cereal bar. I thought kind of a healthy choice. Got that little Quaker guy up there who looks pretty trustworthy. Not gonna, sell me some kind of junk or something. And it's cereal. That sounds better. It's apple, Little check marks at the bottom: low fat, excellent source of calcium, zero trans fat, even 25% less sugar than the leading regular cereal bar. But then I got out the microscope and read the label and found out I was eating something a little bit more detailed. In the crust, enriched flour, which is wheat flour, niacin, reduced iron, thiamine mononitrate, riboflavin, folic acid. Then some oatmeal, high fructose corn syrup, of course, partially hydrogenated soybean and cottonseed oils with TBHQ, that must be code for the chemistry department, and citric acid to preserve freshness, sugar, dextrose, tricalcium phosphate, non-fat dry milk, soy lecithin, salt, sodium bicarbonate, artificial flavors, honey, vitamin A palmitate, ascorbic acid, vitamin E acetate, niacinamide, pyridoxine, hydrochloride, riboflavin, thiamine mononitrate, beta-carotene for color. And now we get to the filling. Sorbitol, water, maltitol syrup, fructose, dried apples with sodium sulfite for color retention, high fructose corn syrup, glycerin, modified food starch, apple juice concentrate, apple powder with sodium sulfite for color retention, dextrose, pectin, malic acid, citric acid, natural flavor, calcium phosphate, cinnamon, sodium alginate, sodium benzoate, a preservative, sodium citrate, xanthan gum, sucralose, and then just a little bit of topping made of sugar, cinnamon, and partially hydrogenated soybean oil. And that's what those Quakers are up to, trying to sneak something like that in. But what it does make me think about is that our food supply isn't as simple as just eating, fruits and vegetables that are somehow, even though they are complex biologically, the stuff we pull off the shelves is just this huge mixture of things. And I'm not sure what to think about that. I think you probably heard some opinions about, our other eating habits, but it's just that awareness thing bouncing around in my head. Then secondly, choice. Our new DC is really, was kind of designed around the idea of choice. We want choice when we eat. We're not happy to just go through one line and, take whatever's on the menu. We want to be able to wander and kind of pick and choose, see what looks good. And the building has been built accordingly. And as good college students, of course, you demanded that there be 4 or 5 things on the menu, and we can have our pick. But to kind of go along with that, I wandered through Meijer yesterday, and I, like you, like to choose. And when I go to pick out my cereal, I want to have a choice. So I decided to count. I topped out right around 200 choices of dry cereal, cold cereal at Meijer. And that's not even accounting for different sizes of the same product. But of course, there are multiple manufacturers, each with their assorted. But 200 choices, I think, says something about, kind of who we are as consumers. 130 choices in salad dressing. My wife says, go to the store and get some salad dressing. She obviously needs to be a little more specific. And then I looked at cat food and decided it was just too insulting to try to count that. I'm not an anti-cat person, although I've thought about it. Might kind of pick it up as a hobby. But it is hard looking at that, particularly when the images of the people in the world who don't have enough. And this is the great irony of the world and the global food system, is that when we, I don't know if you'd say we obsess, maybe we do, but we're certainly motivated by affluence and wanting to have choice and having a lot of stuff. And that there are people around the world who are dying because they don't have enough food. There are a number of stats you can pull up on the web, but there seems to be some consistent talk about children, a child dying every 10, 15 seconds somewhere in the world because they don't have enough food. And so this, one of the curses of the modern age is that we've got food and we can't seem to get it in the right places at the right time, whether it's economics or politics. But hopefully a dream of the future is solving that, and that somehow you don't watch people take their last breath because there wasn't enough food. Finally, before I introduce the speaker, I'm fascinated by the imagery of food in Scripture. Well, the whole story starts, well, after kind of the opening overture, the first act, the villain, the apple. If you're writing the story today, it'd probably be a cheeseburger, and then Adam would have been really tempted. And I've always wondered, was Adam really tempted by an apple? But if it was good food, I think he probably would have, of course, I'll have a bite of that. And then Jesus talking about being the bread of life, teaching us to pray, give us our daily bread, and then telling people, this is my body. Take and eat. And we're going to hear more about that from our speaker as she talks about, this is her title, Holy Kale plus Noodle Casserole, Returning the Table to God. Leslie Leyland Fields comes to us from Kodiak, Alaska, and I thought maybe she came down here to warm up, but Kodiak is an island, and it does stay reasonably temperate there. But her main reason that she's here is she's a writer. And, well, we tend to think probably of food as a science topic, nutrition, health issues, food supply, economics, and so on. It's a much bigger idea. And that's why I was fascinated with the notion of bringing in somebody who bring a different perspective. You don't want somebody taking your hour talking to you about how bad sugar is. So Leslie has written several books on food, and she actually isn't just a distant observer. She and her family run a commercial salmon fishing business for several months in the summer. And so she's very aware of how, the bigger food chain issues, how the natural world is certainly connected with the origins of our food, and has written thoughtfully about that. We'll have a couple of her books in the back if you're interested, at a price better than Amazon, if you want to stop by and talk. And also, she has a sign-up email for her blog, or you can Google her up and find her. But please welcome Leslie Leyland Fields as she comes and talks to us about food.
The season's first salmon hang headless in my daughter's hands, one fish in each, as she walks them up the hill to the house. From the front steps, I can see their heft and length, the shine of their silvered scales, their shimmering backs. I am anxious to hold them myself. It is the first week of the commercial salmon fishery, a profession my children and husband have worked in nearly since birth. For me, it's been 35 seasons here on this remote Alaskan island. I grasp their tails from my daughter on the porch, slide their arm-length bodies onto the counter-sized cutting board. With one hand firm on the skin-thin armor, I begin to stake out the fish with the other. The first cut almost makes me gasp, as though I have cut my own finger. The flesh is deep carmine, so bright. Is this my own blood? I know this color, can see it, even taste it in the sleep of memory. How many salmon have I gutted and cleaned and portioned on the shore of my island, on this very cutting board, these 35 years? I keep slicing, the dissection so enlivening my senses. I do not measure or make any attempt at uniformity. How shall I cook it? This fish we've been waiting for all winter. Shall I grill it with melted butter, minced garlic, and white wine, my favorite flavors? No. For the first fish, something new, something untried and spontaneous, fitting this exact moment in these precise two fish. I begin with melted butter and minced garlic, then riffle through my cupboard, pulling down brown sugar, a spicy pepper blend, parsley, formulating as my hands consider each potential spice, a slow idea of what I would aim for. Yes, this time, a sweet and spicy crust. Even now, I couldn't say how many minutes to grill the fish. I don't follow a clock when grilling. I'm not interested in creating a numerical formula for the safe and simplified replication of my attempts at perfection. I stand and watch, testing the juices, whisking each piece off when the flesh begins to turn translucent, each piece on its own schedule. I carry the platter of steaks to the kitchen. The mood at the table today is jubilant. Everyone has just come in from a morning on the ocean, picking salmon from the nets. My 4 older children, who run their own boats, report a good catch. And the northeast storm forecast for this morning had mostly passed. Everyone is still fresh in the season before the long weeks of work drain their strength and anticipation. I set the salmon on the table, the steaks assembled in a glass dish. Around it, I arrange bowls of steamed broccoli, rice pilaf, fresh fruit salad, ciabatta that I finished making this morning. Meals later in the summer will include wild mushrooms from the pasture, fresh halibut and cod from our front yard waters, deer from our own mountainside, salmon berries from the meadow, leaf lettuce from the garden. While the food steams on the table, 8 faces look at me expectantly, waiting for the signal for prayer. I'm going to do something a little different today, I say, hesitant, knowing that multiple appetites are rumbling under the table and knowing how puny the spirit can feel before such need. This is the first salmon of the season. You all know the tradition that fishermen kiss the first fish. Anybody do that today? My oldest son rolls his eyes, wanting only to eat. I hurry on. I'm going to read something before we start. I pull my Bible onto the table, and before anyone can resist, I begin. This is from the book of Job. But ask the animals, and they will teach you. Or the birds of the air, and they will tell you. Or speak to the earth, and it will teach you. Or let the fish of the sea inform you. Which of all these does not know that the hand of the Lord has done this? In his hand is the life of every creature and the breath of all mankind. Everyone listens, watching the food. Then I pray aloud for all of us that this season we will not forget this. I want to say more, to deliver a sermon, but I stop, knowing the wafers of fish on our tongues will deliver its own message. We eat. Faces are too close to the plates, forks are shoveling, heads lifting with butter smeared on cheeks and crumbs lodged in beards. Everyone talks with their mouth full. We tease each other. Someone will have to yell to get the salad. At least 1 cup of iced tea will be spilled, and we'll run out of bread. These are our glorious, blessed feasts. I am so delighted to be here with you today and to focus on food. And many thanks to Roger Varland for asking me to come. And I just have to commend you all. You're one of the first Christian colleges that I know of to treat this subject really seriously and to devote a whole day to it. So you guys are just smart and ahead of everybody else. I am so blessed to live in Alaska, where we have access to all our own wild-caught or shot meat. But not every meal is that good. There are other kinds of feasts, like the church potluck, right? And we're not always so lucky at the church potluck. Listen to what Jeremy Huggins says about the church potluck. This is about a 4-minute reading. Number 1, the church potluck is unique Oh, and the title of this essay is The Church Potluck, Seriously. Number one, the church potluck is unique in that everyone, regardless of wealth, class, status, or beauty, can bring something to the table, has something to offer. Paper plate dude, award-winning chili master, body odor guy, college kid, over-enunciating chorister, grocery store cookie buyer, beloved pastor, crooked preacher, all are invited, all are guests. We're in this together, so come, sit, eat. I don't like that. I don't like being lumped together like that. I don't like how the potluck puts us all at the same table. I don't like that I often have to sit with someone I wouldn't otherwise choose to sit with. When this happens, what I'll say is, how you doing? Tell me about your job, your dog, your stock portfolio. What I'm thinking is, he is so annoying. When is this going to be over? What I'm believing is that you have nothing to offer me, that I have no need for you. Number two, the potluck is a buffet. Whether the food is oat, ho-hum, or hell no, the selection is limited. You do not get to order what you want. You must make the best of what's available. You are at the mercy of those who contributed to the meal. I don't like that. I'm a picky eater, I confess, but it's more than that. Should someone remark on how wonderful everything looks, I'll say, yeah, looks great. But what I'm thinking is, it's the same stuff every time. Can we not improve the menu? If I were in charge, this would be amazing. What I'm believing is that you have nothing to offer me, that I deserve better. I would hate to confess all this, except that you were not shocked by my condition. You probably don't know me, but you know yourself, and you struggle with this too. None of us wants twice-baked fish and over-seasoned loaves. What I want, what we all want, though we express it in different ways, is for God to come to us directly, to walk down from his hill and hold us, to tell us directly and in his own words that what we're doing is worthwhile, that we are loved. That's why I groan, finally, over the church potluck. If anyone is going to feed me, I want Jesus to do it. I want him to be my host. I want to be his guest. In the meantime, I have the casserole queen and the pot providence elder and the brownie mouth children, all of us desperate for the same thing. We are doing, each one of us, what we can to host each other and to be each other's guests. At the church potluck, all distinction between guest and host is gone. We are neither, we are both. We need more than we can say, more than we can give. The church, I think, is God's way of saying, what I have in the pot is yours. And what I have is a group of misfits whom you need more than you know, and who need you more than they know. Take and eat, he says, and take and eat until the day, and it is coming, that you knock on my door. I will open it, and you will see me face to face. He is preparing a table. He will welcome us in. Jesus will be there, smiling and holy, holding out a green bean casserole. I will not care about the fried onions. And at that moment, what we say, what we think, and what we believe will be the same. I didn't know how badly I needed this. So, yeah, we have all of these complaints about the church potluck, right? Twice baked fish, once is enough, really. But we've got a lot of other problems when we go to the church potluck, right? Strawberry pie, if you're so lucky as to get a strawberry pie at a church potluck. But strawberry pie, those strawberries are heavily treated with pesticides and preservatives, and they're picked by fruit pickers who are underpaid and often badly treated. The cheese whiz and that broccoli cheese thing casserole, the cheese was made in the laboratory, in the chemistry lab, right? And it's pressurized, so it sprays out of a can, and it's high in sodium and fat and all kinds of other chemicals. That fried chicken has been sizzled in trans fat, and I know that the man behind me in line has heart disease, and I know he's going to take too much of it. That crazy pie, there is such crazy pie. Do you guys know what that is? A friend really gave me this recipe. It's like mock apple pie. It's supposed to taste just like apple pie, except it's made out of not apples. It's made out of Ritz crackers. Really, for real. Okay, and those Ritz crackers contain genetically modified wheat. Back to that fried chicken. That chicken came from chickens who were kept in cages, who were abused. Okay, so this banquet table, this church potluck table is like a minefield. There's danger and issues with every single dish. What do you choose? How do you eat rightly? How do you eat ethically? How do you eat faithfully as a Christian? What I really want to know is, what would Jesus put on his plate at your church potluck? Right? That's what I want to know. Does God care about these things? Does he care what you ate for breakfast? And by the way, what did you eat for breakfast? Turn to the person next to you. Tell them what you had for breakfast. Go ahead. Wow. You guys ate a lot. I can't believe it. Okay, I had, one of those bars that Roger was reading from. I had one of those. But I had yogurt too. But does God care that you ate a sprinkly frosted blueberry Pop-Tart washed down with a rock star? Or does he care, you guys are better than that, does he care that you ate a bowl of oatmeal with flax and almond milk sweetened with agave? Are you going to get brownie points with God for that? No. But yes, God does care about what you eat. God does care about what's served in the cafeteria and in the food slot machines. We're going to take, and I'm going to prove it to you. I know you believe me already, but we're going to take a really quick tour of what God says about food in the Bible. And there's a lot about food. You really could write several books about it. We're just going to skim. In the beginning, God made. And he made every seed-bearing plant, right? The fruits and vegetables spoken from his imagination are very good. They're lush in flavor, exquisite in beauty and fragrance, so sweet. And some of God's very first words to the first man and woman are words about eating. He says, "Behold, I have given you every herb-bearing seed and every tree. To you it shall be for meat." The whole world is presented to them as their table. But, as Roger reminded us, it all collapses over food. They can eat everything but that one fruit. And their appetite Ah, you know how that is the moment something is forbidden, we want it. That's the one thing we want. And that is the one thing they wanted, and they ate, and the world is changed by their eating. A little further along, after the world is destroyed by the flood, and a new world is beginning, washed clean, purified. Again, some of the first words that God speaks to Noah are about food. God says, everything that lives and moves now will be food for you. Just as I gave you the green plants, I now give you everything. And we move along in time. And the Israelites, Abraham, Jacob, Isaac, and remember that they were enslaved in Egypt, and the whole redemption process begins, and God calls out his people from Egypt. He delivers them from slavery into a new land. And the Israelites are there in the desert, and they can't feed themselves. There is no food anywhere. And so God feeds them miraculously with bread from heaven, foreshadowing of Jesus, who came to give himself as the bread of life. And then God establishes this new nation. And he loves them so intimately that he tells them how to live together, how to worship, how to eat. He gives them the dietary laws, makes a distinction between clean and unclean animals, between clean and unclean seafood, but you can still eat insects. Understand that. Don't boil a goat and a kid in its mother's milk. Don't eat pork. All the eating laws that God gave the Israelites, because God cared about who they were. God cared about what they ate and how they ate it. In the New Testament, Peter has a dream, and a sheet comes down filled with animals, clean and unclean, and God says, now you can eat all of this. All this is clean. And Jesus, he came to us as living water, as the bread of life, and he spent a lot of his time feeding the hungry, both truth and loaves of bread. He taught us to pray for our daily bread. And he ate and drank so freely with friends and sinners. They called him a glutton and a drunkard. In his last hours on earth, just before he's going to be crucified, hung on that cross, what does he do? He sits down and he has a meal with his disciples. And he chose bread and wine, every day foods, bread and wine, to mark his death and then his ongoing life within us. Jesus describes heaven as a meal table. He says, and I confer on you a kingdom, just as my Father conferred one on me, so that you may eat and drink at my table in my kingdom. When he returned after death, he proved his physical presence by sharing a meal with them again. All the way from the beginning of the scriptures to the end, food, both its presence and its absence, is presented as celebration, as sacrifice, as worship, as gift, as communion. There's a lot to be said about interpreting all of those passages, what all of it means, and we'll do some of that in my workshop this afternoon at 1:30. But Wendell Berry is going to help us understand one huge aspect of why food matters. In his famous essay, The Pleasures of Eating, he writes, let's see if this is on. Sorry. if it just has to. It's on my screen, but it's not on your screen. Anybody know? If somebody knows what to do, please come down here. It was working before. Well, I can still say what Wendell Berry said. Maybe not, I'll wait. This is much more interesting. Now it's off. All right, here comes. Okay. While we're waiting, since breakfast went so well, why don't you guys tell each other what you had for dinner last night? Okay. All right, now, this is what Wendell Berry said. And some of you probably know this. It's a very, very well-known quote. Eating is an agricultural act. How we eat determines how we use the world. How we eat determines how we use the world. How do we use the world? Well, there's not a lot of really happy news. And there's so many things that could be said about this. We're just going to do a little sampling, and most of it is really depressing. And a lot of you know some of this already, so we're just going to kind of scoot through it. Okay, how do we use the world? 877 million pounds of pesticides were used in 2007 by the EPA, and those are the latest figures that we have, and there's very little reason to think that those numbers have gone down since then. The runoff from agricultural fertilizers and pesticides, that is the primary source of water pollution in the United States. And that agricultural runoff is the primary source of the dead zone in the Gulf of Mexico. I'm sure you've all heard about the dead zone, which covers as much as 6,000 or 7,000 square miles. Herbicides like Roundup are used in such quantities and now have been used over such a long period of time that super weeds have grown up that are resistant to pesticides. So then you have to make the pesticide stronger, and on that goes. Factory hog farms have these massive manure lagoons. They emit 70,000 tons of hydrogen sulfide gas annually. You all know that we're losing topsoil at unprecedented rates. At the current rate of topsoil loss, they expect that we have somewhere between 40 and 80 years left of topsoil remaining. And the big guys, Monsanto, DuPont, and others, are creating a growing number of GMOs, genetically modified organisms. And they do that by altering the genetic code of one species and inserting genes from another, even animal to plant. 75% of food. You know, and that statistic is probably a couple years old. I wouldn't be surprised if it's higher than that. 75% of the food on the grocery store shelves contains at least one GMO ingredient. And nobody knows what the long-term effects are. Factory farms, also called CAFOs, confined animal feeding operations, contain half of our eggs and dairy and our meat come from CAFOs. For example, Sanderson Farms is the 4th largest chicken producer in the United States. It processes 397 million chickens a year. It's just an astounding number. Circle 4 Farms in Utah raises more than 1 million hogs every year for slaughter. CAFOs are characterized by use a lot of chemicals and drugs because you've got all of these animals packed into very small spaces. And so they have to use a lot of antibiotics to prevent disease. $13.5 million pounds of antibiotics, in fact. Also, artificial growth hormones are used to force rapid growth and to boost milk production. Poultry get so big, so unnaturally large that a lot of times they can't even stand up and they can't walk properly. You know that when you go to buy like chicken breasts or frozen chicken breasts, you know, they're massive. Chickens don't really grow that big, no? CFOs are characterized by unfit feed. Okay, listen to this. Herbivores such as cattle, chickens, and turkey are often fed same species meat byproducts, including ground up chicken. Chickens are not supposed to be eating chicken. Feathers, ground up feathers, swine and cattle excrement, and cattle blood and fat. Some farms feed dairy cows waste from candy manufacturers. Stuff like unheated starch and rejected French fries and potato chips. As you would imagine, when you have thousands, that kind of density of animals, you've got a lot of disease. And so we've all heard about E. coli and mad cow disease and swine flu, salmonella, bird flu, all of that. The animals themselves suffer from bloat, from acidosis, from abscessed livers and pneumonia, just all kinds of diseases the animals experience themselves. And the whole problem with the use of antibiotics is that it contributes to the antibiotic-resistant superbugs. There's a reason I'm a writer instead of a PowerPoint presenter. I don't normally do PowerPoint. Did you get that? Did you figure that out? Okay. I'm just trying to advance. How do we use the world? How do we use the world? How do we use our bodies? How do we use these God-made bodies? And I've got a bunch of slides on those. You don't want to see those, right? We know about the health crisis that is facing our country. And it's not just a national health crisis, it's a global health crisis. We know about obesity and high blood pressure and stroke and cancer and sugar. Do you know what the average number of teaspoons of sugar is consumed per person per day in the United States? Anybody take a guess? Whatever your guess is, it's probably too low. 32 teaspoons. 32. How do we use the world? How are we using the God-made world? How are we using our God-made Imago Dei imbued bodies? You guys know most of this bad stuff, right? And it's constant news. We have what Barbara Kingsolver calls alimentary alienation. We have a complete disconnection between what we buy from the grocery stores or the vending machines at the airport, which is where I got this, okay? And Roger brought his food. I brought mine. Thankfully, I didn't eat this. Tom's bacon cheddar fries. Oh, you didn't say it's, my favorite. You didn't say that, did you? I bought this one because I hadn't seen this particular little goodie before. So bacon cheddar fries. It says fries, and actually there's some potato flour in there, like as the 21st ingredient, potato flour. It's made out of cornmeal and, all those other things that you need a chemistry degree to read and understand and to know. I mean, like, where did this come from? Did this originate from the growing fields? Did this originate from the soil anywhere? But see, we don't think about that, right? We go shopping, we push our shopping cart down the aisle, or when you guys go to the cafeteria and you're deciding what to put on your plate, we really do have alimentary alienation. We are disconnected from that food and from where it might have come from. We're also disconnected from our bodies, may I say, as well. We've made food all about economics. We've made food all about efficiency. And our bodies, the prevailing metaphor for our bodies in this culture is what? Our bodies as machines, right? And food is simply the fuel that you pump into the tank. See, we've missed what food is for. We've missed it. I've missed it myself for a long time. We've missed the fact that food is connected to our spirit, to our mind, to our heart, and to God's creation. That the point of food is to draw us into a closer relationship to God, the sustainer of our lives. Every bite of food given by God himself is to make God known to man, to make man's life communion with God, wrote Orthodox theologian Alexander Schmemann. Let me say that again. Every bite of food given by God himself is to make God known to man and to make man's life communion with God. And look, instead, what we're doing. Look how we're using the world. Look how we use our bodies. It hasn't always been this way. Tom's bacon cheddar fries haven't always existed. Most of the changes to our agricultural system and to our own eating habits, our own food habits, happened after World War II. when the federal government led a shift away from family-owned farms and businesses to, it turned our farms into corporatized agribusinesses. And in Norman Wiersbe's words, he says what's happened in agribusiness is that we no longer understand eating as an ecological reality. And I want to add to this, we no longer understand eating as a theological reality. We understand it instead as an economic reality. That means that when we decide how we grow food, we're not asking about the fertility of the soil, the supply of water, or the consequences of using poison. From an ecological standpoint, we have to protect soil fertility and water purity, because when you lose those, you lose everything. An economic way of thinking about agriculture is primarily concerned about price. It's primarily concerned about efficiencies. And as soon as you go down that path, you may compromise soil fertility. You may use up or poison your waters, abuse your animals, and abuse your agricultural workers, because you're doing it all for the noble aim of the cheapest price. For a lot of people, all that matters is that the food is available and that it's really, really cheap. But we're realizing that cheap food isn't cheap. It costs the environment enormously, and it's costing us enormously. Many cancers, heart disease, obesity, all of that stuff. Closely connected to it. So we know we're not using the world. We know we're not using God's creation rightly. And some have blamed Christians for this. Did you know that? Did you know this is our fault? And people have blamed Christians for our emphasis on dominion, on subduing the earth. And people have blamed Christians for believing that this world was created and given to us, for us alone, for our pleasure. And that critique has some validity. It does. I think we have held that this world is not our home for centuries, right? We're just a passing through. We've argued it's all going to be destroyed anyway. And we go back to Genesis 1:28, right? God blessed them and said to them, "Be fruitful and increase in number, fill the earth and subdue it. Rule over the fish in the sea and the birds in the sky and over every living creature that moves on the ground." Well, we have indeed subdued and dominated the earth, but not as God intended. Feeding ourselves should not poison the earth. Ellen C. Davis has a wonderful book called Scripture, Culture, and Agriculture. And she helps us better understand God's command in Genesis. And if you haven't heard anything else, I hope you listen to this. Please listen. This is really important. Remember the order of creation, right? The order, and it's significant. God created all the birds, the animals, the plants, all the goodness and beauty of creation. All of that was made before us. And what did God say after each thing was made? Hummingbird, beluga, anemone, golden eagle, fruit bat, kangaroo, rat, star-nosed mole, cicada. He pronounced them good. No, very good. And God's good, God's very good, is stupendous. It's perfect. And God blessed them. And he said to the birds, "Be fruitful and multiply." He said to the animals, "Be fruitful and multiply." See, we were created and set in the midst of a creation that was already blessed before we even showed up. And all of that was put under our care. And we were, and we are, to shepherd creation, to cultivate all that God has made in such a way that they continue to be fruitful and multiply. We are to rule them toward fruition, toward fullness, not toward extinction and dearth. The earth and our bodies, as part of that creation, is to be used in such a way that it flourishes. Unless we think all that ends in Genesis with that command. The good news of the gospel delivers redemption and freedom to us. But it's a freedom that's much more than freeing our bodies, from our souls to, go off into some sort of airy kingdom. The good news of the gospel begins to transform and redeem the kingdom we live in right now, which means caring about this world that was created by him and for him. It's a world that Jesus Christ gave his life for, that he might reconcile to himself all things, whether on heaven or on earth. It's a world where he still counts the cattle on 1,000 hills, the lilies of the field, and the fall of every sparrow. There is not 1 square inch of the entire creation about which Jesus Christ does not cry out, "That is mine," as Abraham Kuyper reminds us. And so, holy kale and noodle casserole, returning the table and the earth to God. And Christians are doing that all over the country, all over the world. There's an agrarian movement going on all around us, and I'm sure right here as well. And Christians are at the forefront of it. So you've watched a couple of movies, I think, and you've had a number of workshops already, and you know better than I do what's happening right here around you. But organic farms are thriving. Ranches, churches are starting farms. There are community farms, and people are feeding the hungry with these gardens. I spent a day last year with a group in Michigan that started a farm in the middle of a mall parking lot. They literally plowed up the center of the parking lot to make a 1 acre garden. And they were going to then offer that produce to all the people who came shopping at the mall. All of this, it starts with you, starts with me, reconnecting our mind and our spirit to what goes onto our plate, so that food feeds us as deeply as God intended. Let me end with an image of heaven that I'll bet you've never heard before. Before I started working on this book, The Spirit of Food, I had never seen it either. I was reading in the book of Zechariah, and the minor prophets, those guys, those books are just not very fun, right? Because it's just all destruction and judgment and doom, and it's just all bad news. So the whole book is like that. And suddenly, come to the end of the book, and then there's this. In that feast, and after that feast, we will do far more than simply sit at a banquet table. Zechariah, my new favorite minor prophet who surely loved food, tells us that at the end of time, when heaven comes down to earth, a throng will gather on a pilgrimage to the New Jerusalem to worship God and to celebrate the Feast of Tabernacles, an 8-day festival of eating and worship. Zechariah ends his entire book with this image of heaven. On that day, holy to the Lord will be inscribed on the bells of the horses. And the cooking pots in the Lord's house will be like the sacred bowls in front of the altar. Every pot in Jerusalem and Judah will be holy to the Lord Almighty. And all who come to sacrifice will take some of the pots and cook in them. Every pot will be holy to the Lord. Mine, yours, and every soup and vegetable and grain and fish and casserole and souffle and crepe prepared within them will be holy to all who partake, and holy to the God to whom it all belongs. I think we should do more than wait for that day. I think we're to begin now, however we can, growing, harvesting, cooking, eating, serving food from pots made holy by our work, by our love, by our worship. Let's get started